USS Alaska, hull number CB-1, was the lead ship of the Alaska class of large cruisers which served the United States Navy during the latter stages of World War II. Super heavy cruisers. The introduction of German pocket battleships in the early 1930s, which were potentially very dangerous raiders, led to some concerns in the United States. The Americans didn't have ships capable of overtaking them at the time. Another concerning factor was that the combat characteristics of Japanese heavy cruisers exceeded those of their American counterparts. In the late 1930s, when the reconnaissance indicated that the Japanese were building more powerful combat units, the Americans started searching for an adequate response, creating the super heavy cruiser. Choosing the class of the new heavy cruiser. Determining the concept of the future cruiser wasn't an easy task. From 1938 through 1940, many draft designs with between 4 and 12 305mm or 12-inch guns were considered. In July 1940, in the midst of World War II, the United States Congress approved a shipbuilding program of an unprecedented scale, the so-called Two-Ocean Navy program. Among hundreds of combat units planned for construction, there were 6 large cruisers with 305mm artillery. Designing the hull. One of the main characteristics of the new ships was their high speed. Already, during the early stages of the design process, protection of the carrier task force was added to the list of tasks of the large cruisers. At the same time, the space for the propulsion was limited by the condition that the ship was supposed to be less expensive and, consequently, smaller than a battleship. Creating optimal ship lines that would allow for reaching high speeds in such a case was essential. Propulsion plant. By the early 1940s, United States industry was supplying the fleet with powerful and compact engines. The main zest of these engines were boilers with elevated steam conditions. American shipboard power supplies outmatched those of other countries. To save time and resources when building new ships, their propulsion plants were made consistent and unified. Thus, propulsion plants of large cruisers were identical to those of Essex-class aircraft carriers, which, in turn, was a double propulsion plant of Atlanta-class cruisers. Main battery artillery. Starting in 1939 and lasting for 3 years, development of a 305mm or 12-inch Mark 8 gun with a 50 caliber barrel length began solely for large Alaska-class cruisers. Their long-range firing capabilities and stopping power exceeded those of all artillery systems of the same caliber in the world. Initially, it was planned to install combined armament with twin and triple turrets on Alaska-class cruisers, but naval constructors were actually able to install 3 triple turrets, thus increasing their firepower. Dual-purpose artillery. The first dual-purpose twin turrets with 127mm or 5-inch Mark 12 guns were introduced in 1939 and became the centerpiece of the anti-aircraft artillery of almost all large ships of the United States Navy at the time. Large cruisers received Mark 32 mounts. Hefty power drive and solid mechanisms ensured a very high aiming speed. The Mark 32 had a base rate of fire of 15 rounds per minute, yet they were capable of increasing it to 22 rounds a minute for a short period of time, with each round weighing around 25 kilograms or 55 pounds. Ship defense. The task to ensure that the large cruisers had devastating firepower, top speeds, and travel distance without increasing their size to that of battleships made constructors compromise on ship protection. As a result, the ships didn't have an anti-torpedo armored bulkhead, which significantly reduced their ability to withstand torpedo attacks. But at the same time, the protection of large cruisers had certain advantages. The armor of the main battery guns and steering gears were very solid. Radio and electronic equipment. The field of radio electronics demonstrated rapid progress in the early 1940s. Very quickly, radar equipment began to play a key role in the combat effectiveness of ships. The project of installing the most advanced radio and electronic equipment on Alaska-class cruisers was already in place during their construction. Among numerous antennas on the superstructures of those ships, KS-type radar stood out. With the help of its massive angular-shaped antenna, it was able to detect large, high-flying targets, bombers, that were 190 kilometers or 118 miles away, for instance. Seahawk. The order to design a new floating reconnaissance plane to replace the aircraft that were accepted into service in the late 1930s was given to Curtiss in mid-1942. One of the aircraft's distinct features was its versatility. It was easy to replace sponsons with wheeled chassis and vice versa. This allowed their use on both land aerodromes and aircraft carriers, as well as with catapults of battleships and cruisers. In October 1944, one of the Alaska-class cruisers received the first production models named Seahawk. Laying down the ships. In September 1940, as part of the Two-Ocean Navy program, an order for the construction of 6 large cruisers was issued before the design works were over. The order was received by a shipbuilding corporation from New York. It had a wealth of experience in building large ships and significant production capacity. On December 17, 1941, at the bank of the Delaware River in Camden, the lead cruiser was laid down. Cruiser construction and launch. The first 2 ships had extremely high construction rates. On August 15, 1943, only 1 year and 9 months after the ship was laid down, the hull of the lead cruiser, Alaska, was launched. 3 months later, she was followed by the same class, Guam. The fact that the ships stood somewhere between cruisers and battleships was reflected in their names. Large cruisers were named after so-called U.S. territories, as opposed to battleships and cruisers that were named after states and cities, respectively. Entering service. Cruiser Alaska was commissioned on June 17, 1944. Despite the war being at its peak, the new ship wasn't rushed into battle, as the crew had to test the cruiser and check her systems. By the end of the year, the cruiser had been in 2 exercise cruises to the West Indies and the Caribbean. After that, she took part in ship-to-shore bombardment training, as well as preparations for dealing with airstrikes. It was not until January 8, 1945, that Alaska began her career, setting a course for Pearl Harbor.
Stationen. Vorrücken zum Erobern dieses Bereichs. Jawohl.
Action stations.
Enemy force detected. Enemy battleship sighted. Enemy battleship sighted. À tous les bâtiments. Cible stratégique repérée à cette position. Enemy cruiser detected.
Enemy battleship foundered. Off to a great start. Enemy battleship detected. Teammate, I need your support. All stations. Concentrate fire on the target. Affirmative. Enemy cruiser sighted. Enemy battleship sighted. Enemy severely damaged.
Intelligence data.
À tous les bâtiments. Cible stratégique repérée à cette position.
Our team has taken the lead.
Bon travail. Main turret critically damaged. Problem solved, sir. The ship is on fire. Main turret critically damaged.
Enemy battleship foundered.
All stations reporting the position of a strategic target. All stations concentrate fire on the target. Bullseye! The ship is on fire!
We've destroyed an enemy battleship.
Problem solved, sir.
Our victory is in sight.
The ship is on fire. All stations concentrate fire on the target. The ship is on fire. Problem solved, sir.
Enemy heavily damaged.
The ship is on fire.
fucking communists and their goddamn bullshit running! You fight me like a man! I technically got him! I got him at the end. It should be technically 0, but we won at the same time. You motherfucking communists and your bullshit! Running backwards and down! Oh, look at me, you're just gonna fuck you, communism! USA! You, see, this is why we bought this shit that I had to feed you with. The Alaska. Today, you got nothing. What do you have? Oh, dreadnought. Ooh, even scary. Bitch! I kicked their ass 3 ways from Sunday! It is dreadnought, right? I don't remember. Yeah, dreadnought. I kicked your ass 3 ways from Sunday! Ooh, look at me, I'm a big bad man! Cause I'm running and firing HE! Yeah, I'm a real man fire AP! They take a 6th of the damage, and they keep on going. Why? Cause they know either you die going to Valhalla, or you're a bitch going to hell. God damn it, I go to Valhalla every damn time! Innumerable odds, I face them! Why? Cause I'm a real man! Actually, another thing about it, this is where the outtakes come in, and to be honest, I just really want to, or not the outtakes, but the corrections, and that's really just that the propulsion plant, there was only one other nation that could match us, and that was the Germans, because we were running high pressure boilers, where everyone else in the world was basically running at pressures of near enough, call it 300 psi. The Germans were running at 550 psi, and we were the most powerful at 600 psi. So, while technically true that we outclassed everyone when it came to our power supply, there was one other person in our ballpark. So, just saying.